We are live. How are you? How are you? How are you? We are going to do some fun things today. We are talking about story. I'm talking about story this whole month, a lot this month, actually, the rest of this year and into next year. I have a weird thing going on here. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm Carolyn J. Carpenter. If you don't know me, I am one of the founders of Hollywood Gatekeepers. We train people how to be expert readers for the film industry. So we train people how to read and analyze screenplays, and sorry, my desk is janky here. That's my new word. It's not a new word. It's a new word I'm using. We teach people how to read and analyze screenplays for the film industry. So anything that I talk about in terms of writing screenplays is always, always, always from a reader's perspective. That's where I got my start, and that's where I'm helping people learn how to do that now. So I'm doing just a live session here today, just for fun, for free, so that you can learn more about story. I am compiling a kind of a little mini course for you that will also be free, that will have just a lot of resources about storytelling in particular. That is one of the main things that a reader looks for when we look at a screenplay is storytelling. So I see people arriving, and I know that you can watch this in a couple of different places. We should be live on YouTube as well as on LinkedIn. Very exciting. So, again, I'm Carolyn J. Carpenter with Hollywood Gatekeepers, and I will be compiling a thing about story and all of the things that go into telling a good story. In our programs, I am also a certified life coach. I have 2 certifications so far, planning to get a couple more actually in different modalities, so that I always have tools that I can help people with depending on what they're struggling with. So different people need different things, and I absolutely love personal development. I love coaching. I love all of it. And so I'm an avid learner. And so I continue to learn more modalities so that then I can teach you more things and help more people. And so that is my mission in life and with Hollywood Gatekeepers. And so as we move forward, every time I talk about reading, writing screenplays, I'm also talking about life. I'm also going to always be comparing how your screenplay and your life go hand in hand. If you're writing a screenplay, if you're a reader, you're helping writers get that screenplay ready. You're helping producers, learn what they want in, when they're looking for projects, you help them find the project that they want. So as you do this will help your life in general. When you're working with story, I really do believe that the better stories are the ones that are authentic and the ones that are universal. And by universal, I don't mean like they appeal to everyone and they're just very vague. I mean that we can understand them no matter where we are. So we can understand it has a human experience to it. And so as we look at these 2 things in stories, we can also look at these 2 things in our lives, right? And so every time I teach about story, I'm going to be teaching about life. And so today I'm going to walk you through kind of the 10 elements that make up a good story. And I'm going to do it side by side with how those same elements make up a good life. I love doing this. It's really, really fun. I won't take too much of your time. I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to start with structure, right? The structure of a good story. And so I also am going to share my screen here so you can see what I'm working off of here. And then I will be compiling, like I said, I'm compiling a free mini course that has a lot of things to do with story. This will be in that. Don't just keep an eye on your email. You will get access to that as I put it together. I'm deciding the things that I want to go in it. I wanted to start with this one, start about story, the kind of basic elements that go into a story, but also how do you create that story on and off the screen? How do you create it on the screen with an amazing screenplay, either writing it yourself or helping writers write it? Or how do you do this in your life as well? So let me, hold on one sec, share my screen, make sure I have the right thing. All right, so there we have it. So you can see on here, let me move this around so you can see it. So we're going to start with kind of the basic things that go into a story. And as you can see on the handout, and as you'll get this handout when you get the little mini course, when you're dealing with a screenplay, right? A screenplay, you have the structural things. That is kind of the bottom line, the foundation. You can't build a house unless you have a solid foundation. So the structure is your foundation. So that structure, a lot of people teach structure in many, many different ways. 3 acts, 5 acts, 13 beats, like whatever. There's many, many ways that you can teach structure. I tend to teach it as a reader. I've read over 11,000 screenplays. So I tend to teach it in the way that I see it most when I read for producers, the way that they most use the language and the way they most talk about it in development meetings and that kind of thing. That's where I come from. So there's never one way. And that's a beautiful thing about it. You find your way. There's no one way. And a lot of people will sometimes say, this is the way. And it's like, yeah, that's a way. And there's this way and there's that way. And it's a beautiful thing because this means for you that you can find your way and you make it your way. And by making it your way, it becomes successful because you're not trying to do something someone else, like you're not just trying to copy someone. You can find all the elements that work for you and you can put it together and do it your way. So when I look at structure, the way that I teach it, kind of the basics is that there's 3 acts to a screenplay. There's an inciting incident that launches everything off. There are plot points along the way where things happen. There's a point of no return where suddenly everything goes haywire for that protagonist. It's right when they're going into the big battle. It's like, it's a point of no return. It's the moment where the protagonist says, I'm all in. I'm going to solve this thing. I'm going to go for the girl. I'm going to, solve the battle. I'm going to take this on, whatever it is. That's the point of no return. And you dive headfirst. It's usually born out of misery, conflict, pain, not getting what we want. Like it's all of those things in a screenplay. And then that builds to the big climax of, the chase to the airport in a romantic comedy, the big battle scene in an action or, a historic epic adventure. And those moments, those big climactic moments, and then a resolution that's like, oh, okay, things are okay right now. And then as we know, sequels are very popular. So they're okay right now. And sometimes there's a little hint of, well, maybe they're not okay because we want to get onto that next thing, right? We want to have that next sequel. Well, the same is true in our life. We have a structure. You have a structure to your life. You might not think that you do. You might think that your structure is chaos. You might think it's all over the place, but you do have a structure to your life. We basically do the same thing every day. And when you're trying to change your life, you make small incremental changes because when we are going through our life and we do kind of the same things every day, this is what makes us feel safe. This is why change is so hard because we go to start to change and our brain goes, wait a minute. We survived yesterday by doing what we did. Let's just do that again. That worked. And there might be a part of you that's like, but I want to do new things. I want to do different things. I want to do big things. And your central nervous system is like, yeah, no, I don't think so. And so these are understanding what your structure is, understanding how your brain thinks about it. This makes it so that then you can adapt your structure. You can go through the plot points of your situation, right? So just like we have multiple screenplays, we have multiple stories that happen in our life, multiple times of reinvention where we're born, we're a child. That's one part of our life, right? We get into adolescence. We get into the time when we're marrying or starting families or starting careers, right? We get into times where our relationships are changing, where life becomes difficult or life becomes more easy, or suddenly we're really successful or suddenly we're struggling, right? We go through these reinvention times throughout our life, just like we have these screenplays that we write and end. So situations, I call it the point of no return. I happen to call the river of misery in life. And this is when you start something new, and that is your inciting incident, right? Just like in the screenplay, you find something. Many of you are in our courses. You started a course, you started the screen reader course, you started your screenplay. That's your inciting incident. We are all in, here we go. And then you get about halfway through and your protagonist is starting to fall apart, as they should, halfway through the screenplay. And so are you. That's when most people decide, you know what, I think maybe I'm going to work on that pilot that I have, or maybe I'll start that other screenplay, or maybe I'll do, when we get halfway through, a lot of people fall off. I call that time period the river of misery. And if you can stick through that and get to that point of no return where you're like, okay, I'm almost done. I'm going to finish this screenplay. I'm going to finish this course. I'm going to finish whatever it is. And then you get all this momentum. And then that kind of resolves and you do the thing. And there's celebration. There's like, you did this thing. And then you're at a new level and it all starts again, just like in a screenplay, right? So you see how they correlate. And I absolutely love thinking of our lives in this way and thinking of screenplays in this way. It makes us better readers because we understand life. And it makes our lives better as we compare it to stories, right? And that's what makes a good story, is having that clear structure so that the audience isn't confused. The audience can relax and enjoy the story and not be wondering what the heck is going on because it's structurally unsound, just like in our life. We want that structure to be somewhat sound so that we can rely on it and move on, right? We want to create compelling characters in our stories. We want to have a really good hero. We want to have a villain that matches that hero. You don't want a weak villain. You want a villain that doesn't think they're a villain. They have their own cause, right? They're the hero in their own story, right? Just like when in life, when we have, you are the hero of your story, and we have people that are causing havoc in our life. They aren't villains in our life. They don't think that they're a villain. They're trying to do their own story, and you could be their villain, right? It's like, this is how we are maneuvering in our lives. And so if you can really look at the people in your life that are causing you pain as not necessarily villains, but as people that have their own story, that is perhaps, if the people that do evil things, the people that really hurt people, like, what is going on that got them to that place? There are things that drive us to certain actions. A lot of times people feel insignificant or unheard, and that makes them resort to violence to try to be seen, right? So there's things that propel us into doing things. There are things that sometimes we do, we're the hero in our own story, but we did some things that we're not so proud of, or we have moments where, yeah, I could have handled that better, or whatever. We all, we're all just human, kind of bumping through this life. And the more that you can put that in your compelling characters on screen, the better your screenplay will be. And the more that you can put it in your life of understanding people's experience as humans, the better your life will be. And the more in a screenplay you have those supporting characters, like Donkey. I think Donkey is one of the best written supporting characters in Shrek. He is all in on Shrek. He's just like, I'm going to make this work with you. And those are the kind of compelling supporting characters that drive that story forward. And they can be villainous supporting characters. They can be, that present obstacles for the hero to overcome, or they can be that support system. They can be the quirky friend in a romantic comedy. And though it can be tropey and kind of like predictable, they also are the things that we recognize in our lives. Who are the supporting characters in your life? And who can you choose to be the supporting characters in your life? Who do you want to surround yourself with? Who do you want to create your life with? So these are the things that help us, create good stories and create good lives. And then you want a tone in a screenplay. You want a general tone and a genre consistency. One of the things, a reader pet peeve that I talk about often, is jumping genres, where the screenplay starts in one genre, and then you can almost hear the writer getting bored with their own story. And then they say the words, what would be cool is if, and suddenly they go into a different genre. Typically, this manifests in violence in a screenplay, where the screenplay has not been violent, has not had a violent tone, then suddenly one character goes off the rails. And that's typically because the writer's getting a little bored with their own story, and so they do something drastic to try to raise the stakes. If you can do this, you just have to set it up to some degree. And if that cool idea comes to you, then you just have to backtrack and like lay the foundation for that to be realistic, right? And so the same is true in your world. Like, what is the general tone of your world? How are you showing up? Are you showing up in an optimistic way? Are you creating a tone in your life? They say that people light up a room, or, they say they have a cloud over their head, or, people carry a certain energy with them. When you think about going to your workplace or going to some public function or going to your family holiday, where holidays are coming up, like, how do you, when you go to a family function and you think about certain people, what kind of energy do they bring with them? They are living the genre of their life. And so you can, when you start to realize, oh, where do I fit in that? And how am I showing up? And am I bringing a positive feeling? Am I bringing a snarky thing? Am I sarcastic? Am I, victim? How am I showing up? The same is true with your characters. They will reflect the tone and consistency of your story. They're human too, your characters. And so you want them to reflect the genre. You want them to be in the tone of your overall screenplay. And you can have an outlier. That's really interesting when that happens. But in general, you really want to understand, what your tone and what your consistency is of your story, if that makes sense. And then you have themes, right? You have a central message. You have something that you're trying to get across. Why are you writing the screenplay? What's the point? Like, what are you trying to do? And we don't, I just went to the Austin Film Festival. It was fabulous. And Shane Black said, if you want to send a message, call Western Union, right? A little bit dated reference, but it is that idea that a message in a film should not hit you over the head. And I joke as a reader, sometimes I'll be watching movies and I'll be like, kind of kidding with my friends as we're watching a movie, like, you're hitting me over the head with this message. But it should have some kind of message, some kind of feel, some kind of thing that we're trying to get across, just like in our life. The things that we think all the time, often the things that run around in our head over and over, the things we stew about, these are creating the theme of your life, right? They're creating how you're living every day. And a lot of the times we aren't even aware of it. We're not aware that the reason we're walking around the cloud overhead, or the reason that we're snarky, or the reason that we set into these kind of characters is because of the thoughts in our head. And if you can start to really get the thoughts in your head, then you can really start to see like, oh, I'm taking this action based on a thought that's creating a feeling. So I have a certain thought and that makes me enthusiastic, or it makes me upset, or it makes me feel a certain way. And then I take an action from that place. So when you're constantly taking actions from a place of thoughts that are discouraging, then you're probably going to take actions that aren't going to get you the greatest results. When you take actions from a place when you're feeling enthusiastic and you're feeling uplifted, and then you make a choice and you do something, most likely you're going to make a choice that's in a more positive direction. And so really understanding the thoughts in your head, what's going on with that, you can kind of, create the life that you want. So as you kind of move forward in your story, then you're going to dive into the conflicts, right? The conflicts and the stakes of a story. These are really important, that you have really just compelling conflict, right? They can be external, something that's happening to the protagonist, disaster films, monster movies, something, comes in and the protagonist has to deal with this external situation. It can be an internal situation where Jerry Maguire, he has an epiphany and suddenly he has to change the external world to match his new internal value. Where Tom Cruise in Rain Man, he has to match his internal value to his new external situation. He suddenly has a brother. Right? So being very clear in your story, is this an external situation or an internal situation? Most stories have both, but what's fueling it can be external or internal, and then you always have thing going on, right? You always want your protagonist to have an internal conflict struggle. It makes the story more deep. It makes characters more rich. And so all of your supporting characters should have some of that going on, right? So that it's just human. And the same is true in your life. When you start looking at conflict in your life, how are you perceiving it? Are you a victim? Are the things in your life, are they external conflicts, or are you just battling in your own brain? I think we do both. I think that often we think that we have an external conflict, but really what's making that conflict a conflict is our internal thoughts about it. We can have two people in the same situation and one will respond one way and another will respond another way. So it isn't the situation that is the problem. It's the thought. It's the way that the person is responding to the situation that makes all the difference. So when you look at conflict in your life, you look at things that bother you, that person isn't necessarily bothering you, because that person might say to you something that's very offensive that I might find funny. So it's all in what you think about it. And when you really start to realize this, when you really start to realize that these external circumstances that we think are holding us back are really just a conduit for a thought that is holding us back. And the more that we can really own that and realize that, the more powerful we become. Because when you're sitting saying, oh, the reason I'm having this obstacle, this conflict is because of that, you're blaming all the external things. You've just given all your power away to all those things. The same is true in your screenplay. When a character is in a victim mode and they're blaming everyone else, they can be a maddening character, really good character. And you can go really extreme with it. That's the other thing, is you build these characters, go to the extreme of who they are, and it adds more conflict. It adds more, it just adds more emotion because they're demonstrating things that people can relate to. So those are the conflict and stakes that should be in a story and that we also have in our lives. And those also will turn into dialogue, right? When we have those eternal thoughts, if someone's in a poor me victim mode, they're going to have different words coming out of their mouth than the person that's feeling empowered. And so when you understand these themes, these genres, these conflicts, the internal thing that's happening, the dialogue suddenly becomes more easy. You can start to hear what they're going to sound like because you're in tune with what they're thinking. You're in tune with their general genre of how they live their life, each character, each person. Same is true in your life. When you hear someone talking in a certain way, if someone is constantly making fun of others, you can guarantee that they're really hard on themselves too. So when someone's mean to someone else, they're a million times more mean to themselves. We are mean to ourselves in general. Most people beat ourselves up most of the time. Like as I work with clients as a life coach, this is one of the many things that we work on is how can you have your own back and how can you support yourself and not be mean to yourself. So when you look at characters that are being mean, then when you get them in a private moment, allow them to be really mean to themselves. It's the interesting thing about that is then it makes them A, more compelling, but B, more sympathetic, which is really interesting, right? They're out there being terrible to someone and they're the villain and we don't like them. And then we see them in a moment where they're being more terrible to themselves. And we realize like how just, messed up they are. And so this can make them more compelling. It can make them more human. It can make them more sympathetic. And then we might not like what we're doing. Still, they can still be villains and still be terrible. But at least we have an understanding of where they're coming from and why they're behaving that way. And so that can create like really authentic dialogue when you do that. And all of this creates your setting and your world building, right? You want to build that protagonist world. When Shrek is introduced in the beginning of the film, he is happy as ever taking a bath in the mud swamp, right? He loves being alone. He's lighting his one little candle. He has no desire to be with anyone. He's just a total, solo guy. He's an ogre. He just wants everybody out of his world. And he does a massive change, right? A massive arc from being someone who then gets a wife, a best friend, and has a big old dance party at the end, right? So setting up that world in the beginning of who your protagonist is and where they live and how they live is really important because we want to take them out of their comfort zone and into the world. Just like you, as you build your career as a writer, as you build your career as a screenwriter, as you build your career as a reader, you've set up a world that's pretty comfy usually. Even if we have conflict, even if we're struggling, it's familiar. And that's what makes it sort of, manageable. Even when we're struggling, even when we're in a situation we want to get out of, we know, it's kind of like the devil, as they say, like, the situation. And so what you want to do if you want to reach for big things is you have to start being able to be comfortable in your discomfort, being able to have your own back. And again, being your best advocate, being really kind to yourself so that you can pull yourself out of situations that are difficult. And as you learn how to do this in your own life, the way that you handle stories in a screenplay it's going to be so much more authentic. You're going to be able to use those personal experiences and those ways of how you're feeling uncomfortable in order to create more authentic characters or help writers as a reader create more authentic screenplays, right? And so you want to have that world built. You want to really understand what is the world that we're building here. And so then as you get further into the story, you're going to make sure that you have really strong pacing, that you're not just, relentless all the time. You have to give the audience a break because after a while, they can't take it anymore. They start tuning out. So you need to give them those breather moments in an action film or in a horror film, or when you have, a driving plot, you need to make sure that you have the quieter moments, one, to develop those characters, but also just to let us breathe for a minute and then you can build things back up. So you want to make sure that pacing is consistent, that you balance momentum of the story, that you're balancing it in different ways, and also that you're making very efficient transitions as you balance that story so that it makes sense why we're going from the big driving thing to then the quiet thing. Why are they suddenly quiet? It can't be manufactured, because sometimes in some action films it feels very manufactured, where suddenly I was just watching one the other day and they had this big action moment and then we needed to see that the characters were falling in love. And so suddenly it was like all the bombs and everything just stopped and they had this little moment. And then they had their little moment and then they got going again. It was like, oh, it was so forced. You want it to be a beautiful one is in Terminator, where they climb the original Terminator and they climb down in the tunnel and they're like, okay, we got to rest for a minute, right? They find a hiding spot. They're going to just stay there for a minute because they're so worn out. And then that's when they fall in love. And so it's like, it's manufactured in that, we find this moment, but it makes sense. They've been running. Okay, now they're going to hide somewhere where they can rest and then we can get to know them. If you do it in a thing where it's just, chaos is happening all around and suddenly the chaos stops for no reason so that we can have a moment, then it's contrived. So you want to make sure that you have that pacing. The same is true in your life. If you drive and you're pacing, you're going to burn yourself out. So you want to be able to manage your time well. And I say this all the time. My students know this saying, but if you are having trouble managing your schedule, most likely that is not a time management problem. It's not that you can't manage your task list. It's a boundary problem. It means that you're doing a bunch of things that you don't want to do. You're saying yes to things that you don't want. So being able to define what you want. We just worked on this in our program yesterday, where we talked about what do you actually want? What is your big goal? What is your big dream? What is possible for you in your life? And when you start to realize the things that you want, you can start driving towards that. And so when you're trying to find that pace in your life, you want to make sure that you schedule in the time for things like family, play, rest. These are things you schedule into your life, and then you schedule in your work time. And so you schedule your play time first. You get that all under wraps. And so you know when you're going to be spending time with your family. Then you schedule your work time. And when you are working, you are focused and you're working on your screenplay, you're working on your coverages, you're working on your career, you're making connections, you're doing whatever you need to do to make that happen. So that pacing in your life is really, really important as you dive forward into creating a career in the industry, for sure. And then visual storytelling is really important, obviously, in a screenplay. It's show, don't tell. We don't want a bunch of talking heads telling us what's going on. We want to actually see it, right? We want really vivid descriptions of what's happening. Symbolism is always a fun thing to use. Easter eggs, things where we see something in the beginning of the thing where we have some kind of prop, or we realize, we see this in the beginning and then that thing has huge significance in the end. Like those kinds of tie-ins are really interesting, being able to really create a visual story. And the same is true in your life. Actions speak louder than words, right? It's like, what are you doing in your life? What kind of visual way are you presenting yourself? What are people seeing you do? How are you showing up in this world? And what visual things do you have in your space? That's a huge thing, especially for a writer, to create a space. And for you readers out there, like you're creating this career, you want a space that you can slide into every day, that's comfy, that feels like it's supporting you, that has I have this little fan on my desk, I have my little cup of coffee, I have the little things that I need to feel comfortable to do the thing that I want to do. And the more that you can set up a space for yourself that is cozy and inviting and inspiring and has all the things that you need, the easier it will be for you to move forward and do the things that you want to do. You can slip into your cozy spot. You can put the sign on your door that says working right now, so your family leaves you alone for the next hour, 2 hours, and you can settle in and do that. So being able to have the visual aspects of your world that you are working in will create an easier way that then you can sit down and create the visual world in a screenplay, or help a writer create that visual world as you help them as a reader. And then finally, there's that distinct style. And this is kind of something that's really hard to teach. It's really often when I'm working with a writer, and let's say they're a huge Aaron Sorkin fan, or a huge Tarantino fan, and they're writing, their dialogue is similar to that, then that's a clue. And as a reader, I never bash someone for that. I never say, oh, they're trying to imitate or knock someone off or whatever. This actually gives me a clue into who they are, what they're inspired by, what kind of stories they like. And then it's like, okay, what about you likes that thing? Let's go a deeper than that. Let's go another layer, because then you're going to find who that writer is, and their actual voice can be born from that. It's a way, latching on to another writer's style is a way for a writer to find their own voice. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's something that makes it a lot easier. Often I'll coach writers to write a screenplay and cast it in their head, literally even using the names of the people that they're thinking of, playing that part. So, it can say Chalamet, and they know that this is the character, Zendaya. We know that, and that's the name of the character. Until then, once you get the character written, you'll be able to hear those voices, and then you can go back through and change their name so that it's not obvious that that's who you want, but it's written for that person, and it makes it so much easier. You'll hear the dialogue more easily, right? And in your life, you also have a distinct style. You are showing up in a certain way. I love Brooks Elms as a good friend, and he's an amazing writing coach. And he came in and he said, the thing about Hollywood Gatekeepers is you guys are so heart-centered. And I just love that that's how he identified us, right? I'm down for that. If that's what our branding and our thing is, I'm all for it, right? We really do want to be that heart-centered place where We can make your lives better, as well as your screenplays better, as well as your relationships together better. We can help readers communicate with writers. This is where we are very heading in a huge way of wanting to connect readers and writers so they can start working together instead of it being so anonymous. We really want you to start, writers to start to really know who's reading their screenplays so that you can have conversations, and we can really make this, we can double down on human connection, especially as AI comes into the picture, right? So what is your distinct style? For both your story and your life, you are creating a values exploration. You're exploring values both in your life and in your screenplay. And in my opinion, values are the center of all of it. When you know what you value, your life is a lot easier. When you know what your characters value, what each character values, then the conflicts are easier to write. So let's say one person values security and one person values freedom, and then they fight about money. We think they're fighting about money. Really, one person is fighting for the right to feel secure, and one person is fighting for the right to be free. And so when you're in a relationship and you're arguing with someone, if you can stop yourself for a second and say, what are they valuing right now? Why are they coming at me this way? And it's because they're valuing something and you're valuing something that's in conflict with that. And so we think we're arguing about a thing. And that's why we constantly will say, like, why can't you see it? Why can't you see it my way? And it's because the person is in their own value. And the more that we can start to see what's going on with that, the easier our relationships will be. If you're unhappy in your life and you're going through day by day, and I'm not saying that we need to be happy all the time. Life is kind of 50-50. There's good and bad no matter what you're doing. So there's a saying called new level, new devil. As you get more success, you have more problems, different problems, not necessarily more problems. You have different problems, right? As you go through things, you're always going to have conflict no matter what you're doing. But the more you can really get a handle on what do I value? What are the things in my life that I value? And how can I live from those values? So if you want to know what you value, just look at what you did yesterday and the day before that and the day before that, and ask yourself why. Why did I do that thing? Why am I here right now? If you're showing up, you're watching this right now, then you're valuing storytelling. You're valuing maybe your career. You're valuing maybe security. You're valuing creativity. It could be different for everyone. There's different reasons why people would show up and watch this. But for you to understand what is it for you, what is the value that you're valuing right now, then when you go to try to do the next thing that you want to do to make your life better, you can be like, okay, I want to do things that value this thing. So like I value play, and I can feel sometimes when I'm getting away from that, I'm not playing enough. My mood changes, I get grumpy. I want to make sure that I play, that I dance, that I talk to my friends, that I laugh a lot. Like play is really important to me in my life. And there's times when I realize, wow, I have not done a thing towards that value. And so I'll just literally like find a thing to go do that manifests in play, right? So understanding what your values are will then create your distinct style. It'll create your values exploration, and it will start to create your legacy of work. You'll start to, as you live into your values, you'll become known for those values. And your friends, your family, your fans, depending on what you do with your life, everyone will start to know you from that. And that will really create a life for you where you're living from a place that you value, that is more fulfilling, that then you can kind of reach out and help others. I really feel that when we reach for the things that we want, when we reach for the things that are important to us, when we tell the stories of our lives, that we are uplifting everyone as a whole, that it is the purest form of contribution. And as we make that contribution, as you reach for, writing that screenplay or getting that movie made or helping that producer or helping that writer or being in the industry at large, the industry are the dream creators, right? We don't let go of our dreams or you wouldn't be here. And so the fact that you're here already means that you're on the cutting edge of dream making. And so we want to really own that and own that scepter of we're going to do that thing. We're going to make that dream happen. And that's what much of the rest of the world will look at for their inspiration. People go to movies to be inspired, to relax, to escape, all the things that kind of help make their lives better. So the more that we can understand these elements that go into a story very tactically, right? These things are very tactical in a script. You want to make sure that you have all of these. And when you can start looking at them as being very tactical things in your life, where you're like, each thing has its own connective thing right next to each other, you can really start to see how this goes together. And then you're spending your daily life connecting it, and it's all going back and forth. And then you have a life that's fulfilled. And then you have a screenplay that is better. And then, in my opinion, the world's a better place. It comes down to that simple. I know it sounds sort of Pollyanna. I know it can be kind of like, what? But it really is something to think about, I think. And it really is, you know, a place that you can really look at. I see your comment. It's making me wonder, did I spell steaks? I did. Oh, no, I didn't. I did it right. I thought, steaks. And I was like, wait a minute, did I spell steaks wrong? So, so great. Steaks. So fun. Hey, Anson, haven't seen you here for a while. Nice to see you back. So, I hope this makes sense to you. I hope that you're able to you know, look at these values and look at these steps in writing a screenplay and steps in, you know, making your life better. And you can continue to create the stories of our lives and continue to inspire people. I know that's our goal here. And we really, really, really want to help you do that. So stay tuned. Keep an eye on your email. Keep an eye on our social media. I will be offering more things that talking about story. We are really focusing on story for the rest of this year. And then we are launching a big new thing next year that I'll be sharing with you. So really excited to be doing this. It's lovely to see you guys here today. I hope that's fun. I hope it helps you. I'm going to go play for a while, and I hope you do too. Awesome. Good to see you too.